Today will be a review of the Tamron 70 to 180mm f2.8 Di3 VXD G2 lens. The important part is the G2, and this is the second version of the 70 to 180mm for the mirrorless system. Now, I have this copy for about a month now, and I will thank Cles Distribution and Tamron Singapore for loaning me this copy of the lens. This is, of course, my own Sony A1, and this lens has been used for me at least for 3 portrait photo shoots. Let me show you some photos here, and I want to share with you my experience of using it. What's the difference between this and the previous copy, and is it worth to actually get the latest version? Now, first, I think you have seen some photos that I've shown so far, and I will tell you that, outright, in summary, this is a different lens. It is a marked improvement over the previous lens when it comes to optical quality, but there are some downsides, and mainly is that the image stabilization here isn't as good as the previous copy, but it is still okay. I do not find any issues while shooting it, but you may have some concerns if you're the type that like to do low light photography with 70 to 180 or 70 to 200 type of lens. Now, without wasting time, let's talk about first the build quality of this lens. Now, this lens has been updated, so this is about 855 grams, made of, I believe, some polycarbonate combination with metal, and this is the lens itself. It's still using, I believe, this is the 67mm front filter. And the lens does extend, as you can see here, but it doesn't drop. So no worries on that. It is quite tight. There is a locking mechanism here. And then now there is the custom buttons and of course the custom selector here. Now this lens doesn't have an AF/MF switch. You will have to use it on your camera body to toggle between them. But it's not a big deal, especially if you are using one of the higher series, like for me, the Sony A1. You can easily change the autofocus mode on the camera itself. Now, other than that, I'll say as the feel, the form is very on par with what you get in any Tamron lens out there. The weight is a slight increase from the previous Tamron lens. The previous one was 810 grams. This is like 854 grams. So a slight increase, but this increase comes with some goodies later I'll talk about. Now, other than that, there is nothing much to talk about the physical quality. Now, this lens does have a gasket, so it's supposed to be somewhat weather sealed. Well, with any weather sealing, just take it with a pinch of salt. Just know that weather seal just means that if you go under light rain, it won't spoil, but there's no guarantee that it will never spoil when in contact with water. Now, the lens does come with a hood. Now, this hood doesn't have a locking mechanism, so it's not the type of hood I like. It's a friction hood, and it does fit nicely onto the lens without much issues like this. Overall, I think that lens, when it comes to operations and handling, also is quite good. It's not very heavy. Just like the previous lens, you can easily hold with one hand without much strain to your wrist. Now, when it comes to autofocus, I do not have much to talk about because, well, I'm not a sports photographer. I only use it for 3 portrait shoots. I only know that when you use it with the A1, I would say you will never need to wait. It is very snappy. I don't have any footage here because I didn't really use it to shoot sports or even shoot some running cars. But I will tell you that the autofocus is quite spot on and is very, very fast. In fact, most of my portrait shoots, I think there was never softness due to autofocus problems. The softness is due to image stabilization, and I'll talk about it a little bit here. Image stabilization on this new lens isn't as good, at least to me, compared to the previous lens. I feel that there is some slight softness if you go to lower shutter speed. There's a higher tendency to miss, higher tendency to get a slightly soft picture. Is it that huge of a problem? I don't think so, but I definitely feel it, you shooting this lens, because normally when I shoot with the A1, I try not to go below 140 of a shutter because Sony image stabilization, to me at least, isn't that solid compared to, say, Canon. But even with 140 of a shutter, with this lens, 140, 150, 160, I did notice that there is a higher chance that is somewhat soft due to image shake. Now, is it a major problem? I don't think so, because to be fair, this is the A1 with 50 megapixels. This slight softness, you will notice it at 100%, but it doesn't affect you from actually utilizing the shot itself. But that being said, the image stabilization is, I feel at least, slightly lower than the previous version of this lens. And that's pretty much the only downside of this lens, except for maybe the slight increase in weight. The best thing of this lens is image quality. So image quality of this lens is superb. If you shoot 70mm or 180mm, it is extremely sharp all around the frame. I did notice that for my particular copy, on the bottom left-hand side, there is some slight softness, and this softness don't go away even till like f5.6. It's still slightly soft at the bottom extreme left corner. But other than that, the lens is extremely sharp everywhere. I'm not really sure. Maybe it's my copy of the lens, or maybe I don't know whether other copies of the lens we have the same issues. But the bottom right-hand corner, on the other hand, is really sharp. Just the bottom left-hand corner for my particular lens itself. I also noticed that this lens have no chromatic aberration in any way, be it lateral or longitudinal. In fact, let me show you some shots to showcase that even on really shiny objects, black on white, the chromatic aberration is almost non-existent. I can only find one shot in my entire compilation that has a sign of a slight fringing, and that is this shot here. If you look really closely, let me boost up the exposure, and you'll notice that there is some fringing at maybe 200%. So overall, I think this lens is extremely well controlled when it comes to chromatic aberration, and it has an extremely good amount of sharpness throughout the entire frame. Now, when it comes to chroma, there is some chroma in this lens. The bottom left hand and the right hand side, you will see that there is some weird shaped lights for this particular lens. So if you are intending to shoot landscape at night with this lens, just note that for at least bright sources of light at the corner, there is still some weird shapes with the aberrations in this lens itself. That being said, I would say as for real world shooting, this lens is superb. In daylight, I get extremely sharp photos. I mean, I can show you any of these photos here at 100% or even 200% on Lightroom. It will just blow your mind that this is a zoom lens. And there is almost no chromatic aberration. Totally blow your mind for a zoom lens itself. This is definitely better performing than any other zoom lens that I have tried so far in terms of image quality. Now, that being said, I have to be fair. I have not tried the latest Sony lens. I mean, you can go and see my history on this channel. I have used the Nikon, the Canon. I think all of them are great lenses, but this one really, the sharpness and the chromatic aberration, fantastic throughout the frame. Now, there is also one more thing I'll touch on, and it's the bokeh. And this lens bokeh is pretty good. I feel that it's definitely better than the Nikon 70-200. I can't remember the Canon that much, but this is, I would say, as in the middle between AG bokeh and smooth bokeh. Slightly more towards the smooth bokeh, less towards the AG bokeh. I can show you some of these zoom-in bokeh shots from the things I shot so far. It's somewhere in between. The bokeh is not like creamy smooth, but not overly textured like, say, the Nikon one. The Nikon 70-200 is like really textured bokeh. This one lies somewhere in between. Which one is better is a personal preference, but I think that the bokeh, to me at least, is very acceptable. Never distracting and generally smooth enough if I need them, especially at 200mm. One last thing to cover, and that is the minimum focusing distance of this lens. The minimum focusing distance of this lens has been increased. It is like 30 centimeters now compared to the previous version, which is like 27 centimeters if I'm not wrong. So what happened is that now the magnification of this lens is like 0.38 or 0.4 times compared to the previous version, which is like 0.5 times. And now how does that look like? Let me show you a SD card and at minimum focusing distance of 70mm. Now that is the highest magnification. If you do it at the 180mm part, you get a lower magnification itself. So in conclusion, this lens, the 70-180mm, is a very impressive lens. And optically, I think this is one of the best that you can get for a zoom of this type on a full frame camera. Now, to be fair, I have not used the latest, greatest of the Sony, but I have seen Nikons and Canons and the previous version. I think this is outstanding in terms of its sharpness and chromatic aberration. In fact, for chromatic aberration, it kind of beat even some of the good prime lenses. And in my memory so far, only the 85mm primes from Sigma and Canon outperforms this. That is how good this lens is when it comes to chromatic aberration control. I think this is extremely value for money compared, to first-party lenses. This is definitely more affordable, and it is really something for you to consider to purchase, instead of buying first-party lenses. Tamron has come a long way, and I think that this is definitely worth its price for the image quality it gives, the autofocus performance. The only downside is the image stabilization, which, if you ask me, for a lens like this, may not be that important. And that's about it for today. I hope you enjoyed this review of the Tamron 70-180mm f2.8 Di VXD G2. This is a really long name, but I think this lens has the quality that you can consider and remember the name itself. That's about it for today. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.